don't want to give you the idea that she wasn't an interesting person. She's a very interesting person. She's done a lot in her life. She's great to talk to. I love having conversations with her. But that day, my mind must have been somewhere else, because we were standing there talking, and I was doing those types of things that you do when you're not really paying attention. Huh, oh, uh-huh, And all of a sudden, I realized that it was silent. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, she asked me a question. And she was looking at me pleasantly, waiting for the answer. And I'm rushing in my mind, I'm going, what were we talking about? What were we talking about? What did she ask me? What did she ask me? It was the most awkward moment I could remember, because I finally had to go, could you ask me that one more time? Sometimes you really need to pay attention. Sometimes you really need to be locked in on what the other person is saying, because it's important. And over again in Deuteronomy, Moses says, listen to this, or hear this, or here's something you really need to pay attention to. You can't just be going, huh. But there's also another element to it when Moses says, pay attention, hear, listen. And that element is that in the Bible, hearing is never enough. In fact, the Hebrew word for hearing really means doing. Because, and I think that they have a really good point here, if you heard something and you don't act on it, you probably never really heard it. So we're going to look at one of those passages today where Moses says, you need to pay attention to this. Dial in on this. Hear this, and then do it. And if you're like me, I'm always asking the why question, because I want to know. And the answer to the why question is because it'll change your life for the better. So let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 6, beginning in verse 1. These are the commands, decrees, and laws that the Lord your God directed me to teach you, to observe in the land that you're crossing the Jordan to possess, so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live, by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy long life. Hear, Israel, and be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. We as a church, as a country, even as a world, are in a liminal moment. We've talked liminality before. Liminal refers to the space in a doorway, where as you pass through the door, you're neither in the room that you just were in, nor are you in the room that you're moving to. You're in a liminal spot. You're in between. And we are all in that stage as we've gone through this pandemic and some of the other things that have happened. We're not where we were, but neither are we where we're going either, because the vaccine is still being rolled out. We're not completely reopened. We're not meeting back together in person indoors. And so we're not where we're going to be yet. You'll get your life back. There will be a sense of normal that will come again. So hang in there. But we're not there yet. And that's why we're talking about this sermon series about preparing to go into some new territory. It's all about that liminal stage. And as we're in this moment, we have this amazing opportunity to prepare for the new territory. We have this amazing opportunity to prepare for where we're going next. And part of the opportunity that we have is the chance to figure out what's really important in our lives. The chance to evaluate our priorities, to figure out whether or not we have them in the right order, and then to make some decisions and take some actions based on what we've figured out. You have a chance to figure out what's most important in your life. We as a congregation have a chance to do that. And then to align our lives and priorities with what's most important, so that when we step out of the doorway, when we enter into the new territory, we're ready for it. It doesn't come as a shock. We have this opportunity to put a plan in place to make sure we're doing the most important things, to make sure we're doing what we need to do in order to move into the new territory. And then, in a couple of months, hopefully, we'll see whether or not, when things go back to some semblance of normal, we actually remember what we said was important to us, and we actually do the things that we said were important. And that's a little bit of human nature, and it comes through in this text too, because every time Moses holds out this choose life, do this thing, and you will prosper, he's going to come back around to that and say, and when you don't, this is what's going to happen. So even that can help us prepare to take this new territory and to keep our priorities the way that they're supposed to be. So in verses 1 through 3, essentially what Moses is saying is, let me remind you what the game plan is. God has this plan and this purpose for you. He's promised to give you this land, and now you've got to go in and be ready to take it. And he keeps reminding the people that God's will for them is good, and that God has a plan for them, a plan and a purpose to use them in accomplishing what God's goals are. And the same is true for us. God has good things for us. God wills good for us. And God is also calling us to work with Him in the plan and the purpose that He has. And what's the plan and purpose for us? The plan and purpose for people in Deuteronomy was to become that people that God could demonstrate what He wanted for everybody. They were going to be His people. God gave them this enlightened law which made them different from other people. If they had lived according to that, people would have seen how knowing God makes a difference and found that attractive. And God is doing something like that with us. God's plan is still the same. He's working tirelessly to bring everybody back to Himself, to bring hope to the hopeless, to bring healing to the people who are hurting, to bring forgiveness to those who have sinned and are far away. God is bringing everybody back. So here's the plan. Let me remind you of this, Moses says. God has a plan. God has good things for you. That's what the plan is. And now here's how you need to respond. And Moses picks up where he left off. I gave you the 10 Commandments. I even made it easy for you. I gave you one for each finger so that you would be able to remember what you're supposed to do. And now Moses essentially says, but I'm going to boil it down even further. Listen to this, he says. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. So there's that word again. Hear, listen, and then do these things. Act on this. These two verses are actually some of the most important in the entire Old Testament. These two verses really begin to form the people of God in a way that even the 10 Commandments did it. Because this becomes a prayer that observant Jews prayed at least twice a day. And literally it says in Hebrew, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. Except Jews would have never said Yahweh because Yahweh is the name of God. They would have substituted Adonai. Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, which basically it says, the Lord is God, the Lord one. But what does that mean? Because even in Hebrew, it's a little bit confusing. The Lord our God, Lord one. What does that mean? Well, the question is not really how many is God. That's not what it's asking. The question really is, who is God? Who is the God of Israel? And the answer comes back, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. And it's not strictly just one of the earliest monotheistic confessions. There are not many gods, there's just one. What it's really getting at in saying the Lord is our God, the Lord alone, It's really like the Israelite Pledge of Allegiance. You know how if you're in school or you go to a school board meeting or other governmental meetings, lots of times it begins with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. This is basically what's happening here with Moses. He's saying, we as a people, we take this pledge. We put our right hands over our hearts, and we say, I pledge allegiance to the Lord. And basically, Moses is looking down through the lens of time, saying the same thing to us. This is about pledging allegiance to God as we move into new territory. So as we move into this new territory, who is your God? That's the question that Moses is answering. And who are you pledging allegiance to? And the answer to that question is going to be the key to who you are. I'm continually reminding myself in numbers of different ways that I belong to God. One of the things, I've talked about my running with you for years, and one of the things that I noticed, I confessed years ago that I quit listening to music because I just wanted to use the time to pray. And one of the things that I like about running is the rhythmic nature of it. And so I pray for all kinds of things, but I also like rhythmic prayers. And one of the rhythmic prayers that I like is called the Jesus Prayer. And the Jesus Prayer basically says, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And it's a confession that I belong to God, that Jesus is my Lord, and then asks for his presence in my life. And I have noticed that when I run, that's just where my brain goes. I don't even have to stop anymore and go, okay, now I'm going to pray the Jesus Prayer, or now I'm going to do something rhythmic with my footsteps. I just realize, wow, I've been running for 20 minutes and I've been praying this prayer over and over again, continually reminding myself where my allegiance lies, that the Lord is my God. Or in New Testament language, I follow Jesus. And when I pray that prayer, when I pledge my allegiance that way, what I'm reminding myself is that nothing else is my God. No politician, no political party, no pundit, no particular issue, none of those things are my God because I follow Jesus. That's where my allegiance lies. And as we move out of this liminal space into the new territory, we need to figure out who we're going to be. And we'll know that by what we do, by that action that we took, by the post that I put on social media, by this hill that I chose to die on, any of those things and more. Do those reflect my confession that Jesus is my God? Or do they reflect something else? Are the things that I'm saying and the things that I'm doing, the small things as well as the big things, because often the small things are more important, are those things in character with Jesus' character? Are those things in line with Jesus' priorities? And one of the things that I've learned is that Jesus' priorities tend to transcend time and place and context. In other words, Jesus has the same priorities in Guatemala as he does in the United States. Jesus has the same priorities for Republicans as he does for Democrats. Jesus had the same priorities in pre-Enlightenment Europe as he does in the post-Christian West. Jesus' priorities, the stuff that Jesus cares about, tend to transcend our little context at the time. And Jesus' priorities are large, and Jesus' posture is always love, not hate, not demonizing other people. And in a time when we see people wanting to destroy those who disagree with them, Jesus says, if you only love those who love you, why would you think that would be commendable? Now, it's not to say that we shouldn't have opinions or that we shouldn't work towards things of a political nature. We should. But we have to keep in mind that there's an important direction things have to move. We have to move from our commitment to Jesus. Jesus is my Lord, Jesus alone, and out from there, not the other way. We can't move from our politics to Jesus. Because if we do that, then we're simply asking Jesus to baptize the stuff that we already believe. We've got the direction that we move is important, and it comes from who we're pledging allegiance to. And if we're pledging allegiance to Jesus, hear Israel, the Lord is our God, nobody else, then we're going to begin to look at things a certain way. And as we evaluate who we want to be, as we get ready to move into the new territory, we need to keep that in front of us, that daily, sometimes many times a day, we need to make that pledge of where our allegiance lies. We need to put a stake in the ground sometimes and say, I follow Jesus here. Nobody else, only Jesus. So if we're pledging allegiance, if we're joining Jews who have pledged that allegiance over the years, how do we live that out? Well, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. Hearing always means doing. And let's just be really honest right up front. Most of us are not victims of circumstances. We do what we want to do. It's axiomatic. Oh, sometimes we blame other things like, well, I have to do this for work, but it remains true because we even know how to get out of it at work if we don't want to do it. We do what we want to do, and we don't do what we don't want to do. So I think at the beginning of what we should be doing if we're confessing our allegiance to Jesus, the beginning has to be, we have to own our own agency. We have to take responsibility for our choices and know that we will choose to do what we choose to do, and that those choices will betray where our allegiance lies. And I think acting on what we say we believe is really important because words come fairly easily. Actions, particularly actions over time, are much harder. I mean, how many times have the words, I love you, been uttered without any meaning whatsoever, because no action that looked anything like love accompanied the words. And I think that's why Jesus says in John chapter 14, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Jesus is basically saying, say what you will, but what you do is what really matters. And if you are keeping my commandments, if you're pledging allegiance to me and keeping my commandments, that means that that is really true. If all you're doing is paying lip service and you're not keeping my commandments, you've never really heard, and you certainly aren't doing. So verse 5 then is what to do. Moses says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. This is what it looks like to take the Pledge of Allegiance to God. So let's take a deeper dive and look at what those mean. And I'm going to trot out a little Hebrew just so that you know I have a seminary education. The Hebrew word for heart there, lev, functions much like it does in English. It stands for our emotions. The heart is the seat of emotions. It's, Valentine's Day next week. And, what's the symbol of that? The heart. It's the same thing as it is in Hebrew. But Hebrew goes a little bit further than that. It's the seat of our emotions. It's the place where our will takes hold. But it also often stands for our minds and our thoughts. And that's different than in English. We talk about, we know that our brains are where our mind and our thoughts take hold. But in Hebrew, the heart can signify all of those things. It's our emotions, it's our rationality, it's our mind, it's our thoughts, it's our feelings. Love God with all of our heart. The next word, nepes, actually literally means throat. It's kind of wonderful. Love God with all of your throat. And what it stands for is all of our appetites, which now makes a little bit more sense, right? Because when you eat, where does it go through? Your throat. The throat stands for our appetites and our desires, and it really refers to our entire person. And so we've already got a progression there. Love God with your emotions. Love God with your mind. Your emotions, positive feelings towards God, desire to engage with God. Your mind, your belief system. I have faith, I believe. And then it moves from this very inner portion of us stuff to loving God with our appetites and our desires. Oh, well, that's a horse of a different color, isn't it? Because all of a sudden, it's more than just a warm, fuzzy feeling. It's more than just something that I say I believe. It's asking, are the things that I really crave, are the things that I really desire in line with loving God? And I'm not going to give any examples of our appetites and our desires because I don't want to narrow it down to anything. I want to give you free rein here to look at what your own appetites and desires are and to see whether the things that in your inner being you crave and desire, if those line up with loving God. The third way that we're called to love God is with our moed. Moed means strength, and that's why it's translated that way. But it's much more than physical strength with all of your muscles. It really means your resources. Love God with the resource of your physical strength. But you also have economic strength, you have social strength, and you have the strength of your possessions. And so it really is about all of the resources you possess, whether it's the resource of your body, or the resource of your money, or the resource of your influence, or the resources of your stuff. And so we've moved one step again, haven't we? So then the question is, does the way you utilize your resources, the way that you hold or share your possessions, the way that you use your influence, does that reflect love for God? So Moses begins with our inner being and then moves to everything about us and then moves further out to everything that we claim as our own. So if you look at that progression, which one are you likely to stop with? Because each one, as we move along, can be a barrier because it requires more and more of us. But basically what Moses is saying is, this is the yoke of the kingdom. This is the commitment that we make in the covenant. It's rooted in our hearts, it's rooted in our minds, but then it extends out to every level of our being and who we are. Which is why I always sort of chuckle when people say things like religion is a private matter. There's nothing in the Bible that says that your religion is something that you're just supposed to hold deep down inside of you. It always is supposed to be working out through every aspect of your being. The Bible doesn't know anything about religion being a private matter. It incorporates everything. And so right here at the giving of the law, we see that faith, even in the Old Testament, isn't defined by ritual acts. It isn't defined by belief in the law. It's defined very much in the same way it is in the New Testament. It's about a deep commitment to God in our hearts, in our minds, which ends in changed behavior and ends in a changed community. Words are important, but actions matter more because they prove the reality of the words, hear and do. It's great that you tell me that you love me, but I'd rather that you show me. When I was growing up, quite frequently on Super Bowl Sunday, my dad loves sports. My dad loves football. But on Super Bowl Sunday, we generally did one of two things. We either drove to the mountains and went and played in the snow, or we went to an amusement park, Disneyland or Magic Mountain or something, which was down where I lived. And the reason that we did that was because it was less crowded on those days. And my dad gave up watching the Super Bowl, which he would have dearly loved to have done, because it was more important to him that he spent time with us. And he knew that we would have more fun if there were less people that are around. Now, I'm not saying, because the Super Bowl is today, and I'm not saying, you need to not watch the game, you need to go out and go play in the snow with your kids. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is, my dad demonstrated what the most important thing was to him. He had a good time with us, I'm not saying he didn't, but there was some cost in there. He would have loved to have watched the Super Bowl, but instead, he chose to spend the time with us. we do what's most important to us. We do what we want to do. We show by our actions where our allegiance really lies. Let me ask you a couple of questions. What have you heard that now you need to do? What priority in your life has a tendency to take over as Lord of your life rather than Jesus? And what do you hope your priorities will be in 6 months?